You are not tired because you are incapable. You are tired because you are comparing. Every time you measure your life against someone else's highlight reel, you leak power. Every scroll, every silent comparison, every "I should be further." It drains you. This audiobook is about ending that habit, completely. Not managing it. Not reducing it. Ending it. You will learn how to stop looking sideways, reclaim your mental discipline, and build a quiet, unshakable confidence rooted in your own daily progress. The moment you stop comparing is the moment you take your power back. Chapter 1. Comparison is mental self-sabotage. Comparison feels automatic. That's because it is. Your brain was designed to rank. Thousands of years ago, ranking kept you alive. Who is stronger? Who has more resources? Who has higher status? Those answers determined survival. So your nervous system evolved to scan, to measure, to calculate your position in the tribe. But here's the problem. You are no longer living in a tribe of 50 people. You are living in a digital arena of millions. And your brain does not know the difference. So it keeps ranking. Every scroll, every profile, every success story. It ranks. And you mistake ranking for improving. But ranking is not improving. Say it again. Ranking is not improving. When you scroll through social media and see someone fitter, wealthier, further ahead, your brain runs a silent calculation. They are ahead. I am behind. That calculation triggers stress. Cortisol rises. Mood drops. Motivation dips. Not because you are incapable, but because your brain thinks status is survival. This is not weakness. It is wiring. But you have a choice. You can let primitive wiring control modern behavior. Or you can override it with discipline. That's the key. Most people never question the habit. They assume comparison is motivation. They believe feeling behind will push them forward. It doesn't. It paralyzes. Think about the last time you scrolled for 20 minutes. At the start, you were neutral. By the end, you felt slightly worse. Slightly smaller. Slightly behind. That is not coincidence. That is neurological taxation. Ranking is not improving. Improvement requires effort. Practice. Repetition. Skill building. Ranking requires none of that. It is passive. It is reactive. It is mentally cheap and emotionally expensive. And the cost compounds. Because once you accept ranking as your standard, you never win. There will always be someone ahead. Richer. Leaner. Louder. Faster. The brain keeps scanning. You keep losing energy. And that leads to the second problem. Energy spent comparing is energy stolen from building. Read that again. Energy spent comparing is energy stolen from building. Cognitive energy is finite. Focus is finite. Willpower is finite. When you burn it evaluating someone else's life, you have less available to construct your own. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. You don't lack potential. You lack protected attention. Imagine two individuals. One spends an hour each night studying a skill. The other spends an hour analyzing people who have already mastered it. At the end of a year, who has evidence? Who has competence? Who has confidence? Evidence creates belief. And belief fuels momentum. The builder gains proof. The comparer gains pressure. You have a choice. You can consume inspiration endlessly. Or you can convert time into practice. Most people say they want confidence. But confidence is not a personality trait. It is accumulated proof. And proof only comes from action. When you compare, you pause action. When you pause action, you pause growth. And then you compare again because you haven't grown. It becomes a loop. That's self-sabotage. Not dramatic. Not loud. quiet, repetitive, daily. Energy spent comparing is energy stolen from building. You don't need their permission to start building. You don't need their timeline. You don't need their pace. Which brings us to the third trap. The illusion of catching up. This one is subtle. You look at someone ahead of you and think, I need to catch up. That thought feels productive, urgent, motivating. It is neither. Because you cannot win a race you didn't choose. You don't know their starting point. You don't know their resources. You don't know their setbacks. You don't know their sacrifices. You see a snapshot. You invent a narrative. And then you try to close a gap that may not even be real. You cannot win a race you didn't choose. Say it again. You cannot win a race you didn't choose. Chasing someone else's timeline guarantees dissatisfaction. If they started 5 years earlier, you feel late. If they achieved faster, you feel slow. If they pivoted sooner, you feel behind. But behind relative to what? There is no universal clock. There is only your clock. Comparison convinces you that life is a synchronized competition. It is not. It is parallel construction. Everyone building different structures, on different land, with different tools. Yet you stand there, blueprint in hand, staring at someone else's building. That's the illusion. And while you stare, your foundation remains unfinished. It's not about speed. It's about direction. It's not about catching up. It's about committing. You have a choice. Continue chasing moving targets. Or define your own metric. Here's the behavioral shift. First, reduce exposure to triggers. If scrolling consistently lowers your mood, limit it. Not because social media is evil, but because undisciplined exposure invites unconscious ranking. Second, replace ranking with tracking. Track your own metrics. Hours trained. Pages studied. Workouts completed. Skills practiced. Compete with yesterday. That's the key. Third, interrupt comparison immediately. The moment you notice they're ahead, reframe it to what is my next action. Redirect attention to controllables. Control effort. Release outcomes. When you do this consistently, something changes. The noise fades. Urgency stabilizes. Envy decreases. Not because others slowed down, but because you started building. And building produces evidence. Evidence produces confidence. Confidence silences comparison. You don't need to feel ahead. You need to move forward. That is the shift. Comparison is mental self-sabotage because it feels productive while draining production. It feels motivating while stealing motion. It feels urgent while blocking execution. Ranking is not improving. Energy spent comparing is energy stolen from building. You cannot win a race you didn't choose. These are not slogans. They are operating principles. If you internalize them, your mental energy returns. Your focus sharpens. Your actions become deliberate. You stop leaking power sideways. You start directing it forward. And once you stop sabotaging yourself mentally, you create space for something stronger than insecurity. You create discipline. You understand the damage of ranking. Now you must redirect your energy into action. Because eliminating comparison is only half the equation. You must replace it with creation. Chapter 2: Stop consuming, start producing. You eliminated comparison at the root. Now you must replace it with action. Because if you remove comparison but keep consumption, nothing changes. Passive observation breeds inadequacy. Read that again. Passive observation breeds inadequacy. When you constantly watch and rarely act, your brain registers a gap. You see strength. You see success. You see discipline. But you do not experience it. And over time, that gap becomes identity. You don't feel behind because you are incapable. You feel behind because you are inactive. There is a difference. Think about the person who watches fitness influencers for hours. Perfect lighting. Perfect angles. Perfect routines. They know every workout split. Every supplement stack. Every motivational quote. But they don't train. At the end of the month, who feels stronger? The one who consumed content. Or the one who did push-ups in silence? It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Consumption feels productive. It feels like preparation. It feels like research. But without execution, it is entertainment disguised as effort. And your brain knows the difference. Every time you consume without acting, you reinforce a subtle message: I observe. Others perform. That message builds identity. And identity determines behavior. You have a choice. You can remain an observer of other people's progress. Or you can become the producer of your own. That's the key. Production builds identity. When you produce, even poorly, you generate evidence. Evidence that you tried. Evidence that you showed up. Evidence that you are participating. And evidence creates belief. Say it clearly. Evidence creates belief. Confidence does not come from watching confident people. It comes from collecting proof of your own effort. A single completed workout builds more confidence than 50 motivational videos. A single published article builds more identity than 100 bookmarked ideas. A single uncomfortable conversation builds more growth than 1,000 imagined rehearsals. Evidence creates belief. Belief fuels consistency. Consistency builds competence. Competence creates quiet confidence. You don't need their permission to begin. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to feel ready. You need repetition. But most people invert the order. They consume first. They wait for inspiration. They wait for certainty. They wait for the perfect plan. And they never start. Because consumption without limits expands endlessly. There will always be another video. Another podcast. Another strategy. Meanwhile, your skills remain untouched. Energy spent consuming without producing is energy deferred. And deferred energy becomes regret. You have a choice. Shift from passive to active. From observer to builder. From consumer to producer. That shift does not require a life overhaul. It requires a 1% adjustment. The 1% shift. Replace 30 minutes of scrolling with 30 minutes of building. Not 3 hours. Not a complete digital detox. Just 30 minutes. 30 minutes of writing. 30 minutes of training. 30 minutes of studying. 30 minutes of building something real. Produce before you consume. Say it again. Produce before you consume. This is not about eliminating information. Information is useful, but it must follow effort, not replace it. When you produce first, your mind changes. You approach content differently. You look for refinement, not fantasy. You seek tools, not comparison. That's the key. Production first establishes ownership. You wake up. You create. You train. You build. Then, if necessary, you consume strategically. This flips the hierarchy. Instead of asking, "What are they doing?" you ask, "What did I build today?" That question changes identity. It's not about inspiration. It's about implementation. If you train before scrolling, you protect your self-image. If you write before reading, you protect your creativity. If you act before observing, you protect your confidence. Produce before you consume. Make it a rule. Because rules remove negotiation. If you allow negotiation, comfort will win. And comfort produces nothing. Here's the behavioral framework. First, define your production metric. One clear daily output. Pages written. Reps completed. Calls made. Problems solved. Second, schedule production early. Before digital exposure. Before noise. Third, track it visibly. A calendar mark. A checklist. A logbook. Evidence creates belief. When you see a streak forming, your identity shifts from trying to becoming. And once identity shifts, discipline becomes easier. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. You are not insecure because others are better. You are insecure because you haven't accumulated enough personal evidence. That's fixable. And it's fixable quickly. 30 minutes a day for 1 year equals 182 hours of focused effort. What skill would transform in 182 hours? What body would change? What knowledge would compound? The problem is not lack of time. It's misallocated attention. Produce before you consume. When you follow this rule, something powerful happens. Comparison weakens. Because producers don't have time to obsess over observers. Builders are too busy building. And when you finish a session of focused work, scrolling loses its emotional grip. You view it differently. You are not measuring yourself. You are gathering perspective. Because you already proved something today. Evidence creates belief. You have a choice. Tonight, you can end the day having watched others move forward. Or you can end the day knowing you moved. That internal difference compounds. The observer feels restless. The producer feels grounded. The observer questions their value. The producer earns it. And that is how you reclaim mental power. By redirecting attention into output. By building before browsing. By acting before analyzing. Passive observation breeds inadequacy. Production builds identity. Produce before you consume. Make this non-negotiable. Because once you become a producer, validation loses power. External applause becomes optional. You no longer depend on likes or praise to feel progress. You feel it in your discipline. And that leads directly into the next trap you must dismantle. Because even producers can become addicted to approval if they are not careful. You stopped sabotaging yourself with comparison. You replaced consumption with creation. Now it's time to eliminate the need for external validation. Chapter 3: The Silent Cost of Seeking Validation. You stopped comparing. You started producing. Now you must confront something deeper. Your need for approval. Because even producers can be trapped. Validation is addictive. Not metaphorically. Neurologically. Every time someone praises you, likes your post, approves your decision, your brain releases dopamine. A reward chemical. A signal that says, do that again. And so you do. You adjust your behavior slightly. You refine your image. You curate your output. Not for excellence. For applause. That's the shift. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. The problem is not that approval feels good. The problem is that it becomes your metric. And once validation becomes your metric, your internal compass breaks. Approval is a dopamine loop. Post. Check. Refresh. Wait. Reward. Repeat. Over time, this loop conditions you. You stop asking, is this aligned with my standards? And start asking, will this be well received? That is subtle self-abandonment. You have a choice. You can chase applause. Or you can build standards. That's the key. When praise determines direction, your identity becomes flexible. You shapeshift to maintain approval. You avoid discomfort. You avoid unpopular truth. You avoid bold decisions. Because you fear silence. But silence is not rejection. Silence is neutrality. And neutrality feels threatening only when you are addicted to feedback. It's not about confidence. It's about dependency. If no one claps, do you continue? If no one notices, do you persist? If no one validates, Do you believe in your work? These questions expose stability. Because external applause is unstable currency. Say it clearly. External applause is unstable currency. It fluctuates. It changes with trends, with algorithms, with mood, with audience. If your self-worth depends on something unstable, your identity will feel unstable. And instability breeds anxiety. One day you feel seen. The next day you feel invisible. Nothing about your value changed. Only the feedback did. But because you outsourced your self-worth, your internal state rises and falls with public opinion. That is not power. That is dependence. You don't need their permission to believe in your path. You don't need consensus to continue. But you must stop outsourcing judgment. Here's the behavioral shift. Stop measuring your day by reaction. Start measuring your day by execution. Did you complete your training? Did you follow your plan? Did you honor your word? Those questions are stable. Public opinion is volatile. Private standards are stable. And this is where transformation happens. Private standards versus public opinion. Most people operate publicly. They post goals before they begin. They announce before they execute. They seek motivation from others instead of manufacturing it internally. But real growth is quiet. Think about the athlete training at 5 a.m. No cameras. No applause. No audience. Just repetition. Sweat. Failure. Adjustment. They are not training for validation. They are training for performance. That's the key. When your standard is private, your effort becomes pure. You lift because you said you would. You write because you committed. You train because it aligns with your goal. Not because someone is watching. And here is the paradox. The people who eventually earn the most respect are the ones who trained in obscurity. Because their identity was not shaped by applause. It was shaped by repetition. Evidence creates belief. Not comments. Not likes. Not praise. Evidence. External applause is unstable currency. If you build your identity on it, you will constantly feel broke. You have a choice. Continue refreshing for validation. Or begin reinforcing your own standard. Create an internal scorecard. This is practical. Write down 3 daily non-negotiables tied to your long-term goal. For example, train for 45 minutes. Read 20 pages. Practice your skill for 30 minutes. At the end of the day, score yourself privately. No posting. No sharing. No announcement. Did you execute? Yes or no? That is your currency. Over time, this internal scoring builds self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of real confidence. Because confidence is not loud. It is quiet certainty. When your standards are internal, you become difficult to shake. Criticism loses sting. Praise loses control. Silence loses threat. You operate independently of reaction. That is mental power. It's not about ego. It's about discipline. Discipline means you act according to your standards regardless of external response. You show up even when unnoticed. You persist even when uncelebrated. You improve even when unrecognized. You don't need their permission. And once you detach from validation, something interesting happens. Your work improves. Because now it is honest. Not optimized for applause. Optimized for growth. You stop asking, will they like this? You start asking, is this better than yesterday? That question builds mastery. And mastery is immune to popularity. External applause is unstable currency. Internal standards compound. Choose compounding. Because if you rely on approval, comparison will return. You will measure your worth against reaction. You will compete for attention. You will drift from discipline into performance. And performance without integrity is exhausting. But when you build privately, when you track internally, when you measure execution over applause, your confidence becomes durable. You become steady, unmoved by fluctuations, focused on controllables. You stopped comparing. You started producing. Now you stopped seeking permission. And as you detach from public opinion, another illusion begins to collapse. The illusion that you are behind. Because when your standards are internal, timelines lose their power. External applause is unstable currency. Private discipline is permanent capital. Hold that. Because in the next chapter, we dismantle the myth that you are late, behind, or off schedule. Chapter 4. Your timeline is not behind. You feel late. You feel behind. You feel like everyone else started earlier, moved faster, figured it out sooner. That belief is heavy. And it is false. There is no universal clock for success. There is no global countdown you are failing to meet. The idea of too late is a social construct reinforced by comparison. And you already know what comparison does. It drains power. You have a choice. You can continue measuring your life against arbitrary timelines. Or you can detach from them completely. That's the key. The myth of too late survives because you only see outcomes. You see the 28-year-old millionaire, the 22-year-old entrepreneur, the 19-year-old athlete signing contracts. You see the visible win. You do not see the invisible variables. You do not see the early exposure, the financial support, the mentorship, the failure cycles, the private breakdowns, the 10-year head start. And even when someone truly starts later and succeeds, that narrative rarely trends. But it exists everywhere. Writers who publish their first book at 50. Entrepreneurs who launch at 40. Athletes who peak in their 30s. Professionals who pivot careers after a decade in another field. Success is not age-dependent. It is consistency-dependent. It's not about timing. It's about discipline. If you plant a seed today and water it daily, growth begins today. Not 5 years ago. Not at 18. Not at 25. Today. You don't need their permission to begin late. You don't need society's approval to start over. You need commitment. The myth says, you should already be further. The truth says, start where you are. And once you start, the clock becomes irrelevant. But there is another distortion feeding this anxiety. Invisible struggles. You are comparing your backstage to someone else's highlight reel. Say it again. You are comparing your backstage to someone else's highlight reel. You see polished success. You do not see the rejected applications, the failed launches, the injuries, the debt, the anxiety, the quiet doubt. Every visible achievement has a hidden history, but social platforms do not reward struggle. They reward outcome. So you consume outcome after outcome and assume it was linear. It wasn't. No meaningful trajectory is linear. But because you only see the top of the mountain, you assume they teleported there. And you assume your climb is slow. You have a choice. You can internalize curated illusions. Or you can respect the invisible grind behind every real success. That's the key. When you accept that struggle is universal but invisible, comparison weakens. You stop interpreting difficulty as evidence of inadequacy. You start recognizing it as part of process. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Struggle does not mean you are behind. It means you are building. And building is rarely glamorous. Think about your own progress. The early attempts that failed. The skills that felt awkward. The days you wanted to quit. Now imagine someone watching only your eventual result. They would assume confidence, ease, natural talent. They would not see the repetition. That is exactly what you are doing to others. You are comparing your backstage to someone else's highlight reel. And that comparison is distorted by design. So what replaces it? Micro progress. Small, consistent, measurable action. Because while timelines are illusions, compounding is real. Micro progress compounds. 1 hour a day for a year is 365 hours. 10 push-ups a day become 3,650 push-ups in a year. 5 pages a day become 1,825 pages read. Small actions seem insignificant in isolation, but consistency multiplies. That's the key. You do not need dramatic leaps. You need disciplined increments. When you focus on micro-progress, your attention shifts from "Am I ahead?" to "Did I improve?" That question restores power. Because improvement is controllable. Timing is not. You have a choice. Chase an imaginary deadline. Or commit to daily increments. If you commit to daily increments, something changes psychologically. You stop obsessing over distance. You focus on direction. You stop asking, "Why am I not there yet?" You start asking, "Did I move today?" That question builds stability. And stability builds confidence. It's not about age. It's about accumulation. Accumulation of reps. Accumulation of pages. Accumulation of failures. Accumulation of lessons. The person who seems ahead likely accumulated earlier. That does not invalidate your ability to accumulate now. But accumulation requires patience. And patience requires discipline. You don't need their permission to move at your own pace. You don't need approval for starting late. You need consistency. Micro-progress compounds. Say it again. Micro-progress compounds. When you trust this principle, urgency softens. You stop sprinting emotionally. You start building methodically. And methodical effort outperforms frantic comparison. The myth of too late dissolves when you respect compounding. Because compounding does not care about your age. It cares about repetition. You feel behind because you are looking sideways. When you look forward and act, the feeling weakens. When you act daily, it disappears. Your timeline is not behind. It is unfolding. And the speed of its unfolding is determined by your daily discipline. Not someone else's highlight reel. Not public applause. Not arbitrary milestones. Discipline. That is the constant thread. You stopped comparing. You started producing. You detached from validation. Now you release the pressure of artificial timelines. And as you release that pressure, another emotion becomes easier to control. Envy. Because once you stop believing you are behind, jealousy loses its fuel. And in the next chapter, we convert envy into something useful. Chapter 5. Discipline silences envy. Envy feels personal. It feels like a character flaw. It feels like weakness. It is neither. Envy is misdirected energy. And discipline redirects it. When you see someone ahead of you, achieving something you want, a surge hits your system. Tension. Irritation. Restlessness. That sensation is not the problem. What you do next is the problem. You have a choice. You can sit in envy. Or you can convert it into effort. That's the key. Action neutralizes jealousy. Say it clearly. Work is the antidote. When you work, envy weakens. When you sit idle, envy expands. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, you see someone in exceptional shape. You feel that familiar sting. Instead of training, you scroll further. You analyze their routine, their genetics, their advantages. You do nothing. What happens to envy? It grows. Now imagine the second scenario. You see the same person. You feel the same sting. But instead of spiraling, You drop to the floor and do 20 push-ups. Or you schedule your workout. Or you prepare your meals. What happens to envy? It transforms. Work is the antidote. Envy survives in inactivity. The moment you move, it loses oxygen. Because effort restores agency. Agency kills resentment. Most people do not hate others' success. They hate their own stagnation. That distinction matters. When you are actively progressing, other people's progress becomes information, not insult. But when you are idle, other people's progress feels like accusation. That is why idle minds magnify comparison. When your day lacks structure, your mind searches for stimulation. It drifts. It scrolls. It evaluates. It ranks. You already know what ranking does. Ranking is not improving. An idle schedule invites insecurity. No defined mission. No defined targets. No defined tasks. Just open time. And open time becomes comparison time. You have a choice. Design your day. Or let distraction design it for you. That's the key. Direction reduces envy. When you wake up knowing exactly what must be done, you have less bandwidth for comparison. When you finish the day exhausted from execution, you have less emotional energy to resent others. Work is the antidote. Not occasional work. Consistent work. Structured work. Disciplined work. It's not about emotion. It's about routine. Routine is armor. Say it again. Routine is armor. Armor against distraction. Armor against comparison. Armor against envy. Because routine limits decision fatigue. Routine reduces exposure to triggers. Routine keeps you moving forward even when motivation fades. Here is a practical framework. Start with 3 daily anchors. Anchor 1. Physical discipline. Move your body every day. Non-negotiable. Training builds psychological stability. Anchor 2. Skill development. Spend focus time improving a core skill tied to your long-term direction. Anchor 3. Reflection. End the day reviewing execution, not emotion. This structure compresses idle time. And compressed idle time reduces comparison. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. You are not jealous because you are broken. You are jealous because your energy is stagnant. Move it. Direct it. Channel it. Work is the antidote. When you build consistently, envy becomes instructive. Instead of thinking, why them? You think, what are they doing that I can learn from? That shift is powerful. It transforms envy into strategy. But that shift only happens when you are already in motion. If you are sitting still, envy feels heavy. If you are moving, envy feels informative. You don't need their permission to pursue what they achieved. You don't need their approval to try. But you do need structure. Without structure, emotion controls behavior. With structure, behavior controls emotion. You have a choice. Let envy dictate your mood. Or let discipline dictate your schedule. Choose schedule. Because schedules produce evidence. Evidence creates belief. And belief builds confidence. When confidence rises, envy fades. Not because others shrink, but because you grow. Work is the antidote. Remember that. The next time jealousy surfaces, do not suppress it. Do not judge it. Convert it. Immediately act. 1 email sent. 1 workout completed. 1 hour practiced. Small action. Immediate movement. That is how you retrain your response. Over time, your brain associates envy with execution. And eventually, envy stops appearing as frequently. Because you are too busy building. You have replaced comparison with production. You have replaced validation with standards. You have rejected artificial timelines. Now you have learned to convert jealousy into fuel. Discipline silences envy. Not by force, by focus. And once your focus sharpens, another realization becomes unavoidable. Most of what disturbs you lies outside your control. And in the next chapter, you will narrow your energy even further. Because ultimate mental power comes from one principle. Control effort. Release outcomes. Chapter 6. Focus on controllables only. Your mental power leaks when your attention drifts into territory you do not control. That is the truth. You can eliminate comparison. You can silence envy. You can detach from validation. But if you obsess over outcomes, you will still feel unstable. Because outcomes are not fully yours. Effort is. Say it clearly. Control effort. Release outcomes. That is the operating principle of disciplined focus. The circle of control framework is simple. There are things you cannot control. There are things you can influence. And there are things you directly control. Most people live mentally in the outer circle. They worry about market shifts. They worry about competitors. They worry about recognition. They worry about timing. They worry about other people's opinions. Wrong circle. You have a choice. Stay in the outer circle and feel powerless. Or return to the inner circle and regain authority. That's the key. Your inner circle includes your preparation, your training, your consistency, your attitude, your response to setbacks, your standards. You control effort. You do not control applause. You control preparation. You do not control opportunity timing. You control practice. You do not control public reception. Control effort. Release outcomes. Repeat it until it becomes instinct. Because outcome obsession creates anxiety. When you tie your emotional stability to results, your mood fluctuates constantly. If the numbers rise, you feel strong. If the numbers drop, you feel insecure. Nothing about your character changed. Only the outcome shifted. That is volatility. It's not about ambition. It's about discipline. Ambition without discipline fixates on results. Discipline without obsession fixates on process. Consider two athletes. One trains while obsessing over the championship trophy. Every session feels like pressure. Every mistake feels catastrophic. The other trains focusing on execution, form, repetition, recovery, improvement. Who performs better under stress? The one focused on inputs. Because inputs are controllable. Outputs are delayed reflections of inputs. When you obsess over results, you create emotional urgency without productive action. When you focus on effort, you create steady momentum. You have a choice. Chase the scoreboard. Or master the game. That's the key. If you measure your value by outcome, you will constantly feel unstable. If you measure your value by execution, you will feel grounded. Execution is yours. Outcomes are influenced by variables beyond you. Weather, timing, competition, context. Do not hand your mental state to variables you cannot command. Control effort. Release outcomes. Now make this practical. You need a daily controllable checklist. Not vague intentions. Clear behaviors. Sleep. Training. Learning. Consistency. Start with sleep. You control when you go to bed. You control when you wake up. Poor sleep weakens discipline. It magnifies emotion. It increases comparison. Sleep is controllable. Next, training. Move your body daily. Even briefly. Physical discipline reinforces mental discipline. When you complete a workout, you send a message to yourself, I execute. That message builds identity. Learning. Read. Study. Practice your craft. Skill development is fully within your circle. Consistency. Show up even when you do not feel inspired. That is the foundation. It's not about talent. It's about discipline. Each night, review your checklist. Did you sleep with intention? Did you train? Did you learn? Did you execute your core task? Yes or no? No emotional analysis. Just evaluation. This shifts your focus from did I win to did I execute? That shift stabilizes your mind. Because even on days when outcomes disappoint, you can still win your effort. And when you consistently win effort, outcomes improve naturally over time. But even if they do not improve immediately, your identity strengthens. You don't need their permission to commit to process. You don't need external validation to continue executing. Your circle is enough. You have a choice. Complain about variables. Or master behavior. Complaining feels active, but produces nothing. Execution feels small but compounds. Control effort. Release outcomes. When you internalize this, comparison weakens again. Because you stop asking, why are they ahead? You start asking, did I control my effort today? That question returns power instantly. It removes distraction. It reduces anxiety. It narrows focus. And narrowed focus builds progress. Outcome obsession scatters energy. Input focus concentrates it. Concentrated energy creates growth. Growth builds confidence. Confidence protects mental power. This is how you reclaim it. Not by controlling the world, but by mastering your response to it. Control effort. Release outcomes. Let that guide every decision. When you feel anxiety rising, ask yourself, am I focused on something I cannot control? If yes, return to effort. If no, execute harder. That's the key. Because once you live inside your circle of control, external noise loses authority. You become steady, less reactive, more deliberate. And that steadiness prepares you for the next transformation. Because once you focus on controllables, you must eliminate another subtle trap. The need to prove yourself. And that is where we go next. Chapter 7. Stop proving and start improving. There is a subtle trap that keeps you performing instead of progressing. It is the need to prove. Prove you are capable. Prove you are successful. Prove you are worthy. Prove you belong. On the surface, it looks like ambition. Underneath, it is insecurity dressed as drive. Proving is external. Improving is internal. That distinction changes everything. When you operate from proving, your decisions are shaped by visibility. When you operate from improving, your decisions are shaped by growth. You have a choice. Chase perception. Or pursue progress. That's the key. The ego trap is simple. If others can see it, it feels valuable. If others cannot see it, it feels insignificant. So people buy the car before mastering the craft. They post the announcement before building the skill. They upgrade the image before upgrading the ability. Flashy purchases. Loud declarations. Public milestones. All designed to signal. But signals do not create substance. Substance creates signals. It's not about success. It's about discipline. Consider two individuals. One spends money to appear successful. Designer labels. Visible status. Immediate validation. The other spends time mastering a skill. Studying quietly. Practicing deliberately. No audience. Years later, who has leverage? The one who signaled, or the one who improved? Signals fade. Skill compounds. Proving demands attention. Improving demands patience. You don't need their permission to build quietly. You don't need applause to sharpen your craft. But you do need to resist the ego's demand to be seen. That is difficult. Because being seen feels rewarding. But being skilled is powerful. There is a difference. When you focus on proving, you ask, how does this look? When you focus on improving, you ask, is this better than yesterday? That shift is maturity. Improve in silence. Say it again. Improve in silence. This phrase is not about secrecy. It is about priority. Your priority must be growth, not recognition. When recognition becomes the goal, you distort effort. You choose what looks impressive instead of what builds competence. You skip fundamentals because they are boring. You avoid beginner stages because they are humbling. But fundamentals are where mastery lives. And mastery is quiet. Improve in silence. The strongest performers often trained in obscurity. No cameras. No announcements. Just repetition. Because repetition builds identity. Identity builds confidence. Confidence does not need proving. You have a choice. Post about your ambition. Or execute it. Talk about your goals. Or train for them. Signal potential. Or build capability. That's the key. Long-term identity shift happens when you move from image-oriented thinking to process-oriented thinking. Image asks, how am I perceived? Process asks, what am I practicing? Image is fragile. Process is durable. Image depends on reaction. Process depends on discipline. External applause is unstable currency. Internal growth compounds. When you prioritize process, something stabilizes inside you. You stop chasing approval. You stop performing for invisible judges. You focus on incremental gains. And incremental gains accumulate into real power. It's not about ego. It's about discipline. Ego wants validation. Discipline wants improvement. Ego wants to look advanced. Discipline is willing to look like a beginner. That is strength. Because beginners grow. Performers stagnate. If you are constantly trying to prove yourself, you cannot take risks. You cannot admit ignorance. You cannot experiment. Because proving demands certainty. Improving welcomes correction. You have a choice. Protect your image. Or expand your capacity. Expansion requires humility. Humility requires silence. Improve in silence. When you operate this way, your energy shifts. Instead of asking, who noticed? You ask, what did I refine? Instead of measuring likes, you measure repetitions. Instead of seeking validation, you seek feedback for growth. That mindset builds resilience. Because your identity is no longer tied to appearance. It is tied to progress. And progress is controllable. Control effort. Release outcomes. You are not here to impress temporarily. You are here to build permanently. Permanent growth demands consistent, unglamorous effort. Early mornings. Private study. Hard repetitions. Boring fundamentals. No applause. Just improvement. Improve in silence. Let your results speak later. But even when they do, your confidence will not depend on them. Because you know the work behind them. You know the hours no one saw. That knowledge creates unshakable stability. You don't need their permission to evolve. You don't need recognition to continue. You need repetition. This is how you shift identity. From someone trying to be seen, to someone committed to becoming skilled. From image-driven to process-driven. And once you embrace that shift, something powerful happens. You stop competing for attention. You start competing with your past. Because improving is not about beating others. It is about refining yourself. And that leads to the next evolution. Once you stop proving and start improving, you begin to build something far more durable than approval. You build quiet confidence. Chapter 8. Build quiet confidence through evidence. Confidence is not a personality trait. It is not volume. It is not charisma. It is not arrogance. Confidence is accumulated proof. And proof is earned. Confidence is earned, not declared. You cannot talk yourself into it. You cannot post your way into it. You cannot visualize your way into it. You build it. One kept promise at a time. That's the key. Most people want to feel confident before they act. That is backward. Action produces evidence. Evidence produces belief. Belief produces confidence. Evidence creates belief. You have heard that before. Now you apply it deeper. Every time you say you will do something and you follow through, you deposit into self-trust. Every time you break your word to yourself, you withdraw from it. Confidence is simply the balance of that account. You have a choice. Strengthen self-trust daily, or erode it quietly. It's not about personality. It's about discipline. You want quiet confidence? Keep promises. Small ones. Daily ones. Unseen ones. If you tell yourself you will wake up at a certain time, wake up. If you say you will train, train. If you commit to studying, study. No negotiation. No drama. No announcement. Execution. Confidence is earned, not declared. When you repeatedly prove to yourself that you follow through, your internal dialogue changes. Doubt weakens. Hesitation fades. You move with steadiness. Not because you are superior, because you have evidence. Self-trust is built through small wins, not massive breakthroughs. Small wins stack. 10 minutes of focus. 20 push-ups. 1 difficult conversation handled directly. 1 page written. 1 distraction resisted. Small wins. Stacked daily. Over time, they reshape identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That shift is powerful. Because identity drives behavior. And behavior reinforces identity. You have a choice. Break your own promises. Or build your own credibility. That's the key. Self-trust cannot be outsourced. No one can give it to you. You earn it privately. You don't need their permission to become disciplined. You don't need applause to validate your effort. You need consistency. Stack daily commitments. Start small. If you struggle with consistency, lower the target but keep the standard. 5 minutes of focused work is better than 0. 10 push-ups daily is better than none. 1 paragraph written daily is better than endless planning. The size of the action matters less than the reliability of the action. Reliability builds identity. Identity builds confidence. Confidence stabilizes emotion. This is how you reclaim mental power. Not through hype. Through habit. Now add structure. Create a scoreboard of personal progress. Not public metrics. Not comparison charts. A private scoreboard. Track against yesterday. Compete with your past. Say it clearly. Compete with your past. Not your neighbor. Not your colleague. Not the stranger online. Your past. Did you read more today than yesterday? Did you train harder than last week? Did you improve a skill incrementally? That is your competition. Compete with your past. This removes envy. This removes insecurity. Because you always have access to yesterday. And you always have control over today. When your metric is personal improvement, progress becomes measurable and motivating. Even slow improvement feels satisfying when it is real. But when your metric is external comparison, even massive growth feels insufficient. That is the trap. It's not about speed. It's about discipline. Discipline ensures progress. Progress reinforces belief. Belief strengthens confidence. Confidence protects focus. You have a choice. Chase validation. Or chase consistency. Consistency wins long term. Create a visible tracker. Calendar marks. Habit logs. Performance journals. Write down your commitments. Track completion. Review weekly. Adjust deliberately. No emotion. Just data. If you missed a commitment, correct it immediately. Do not spiral. Do not justify. Adjust and execute. That's the key. Confidence does not require perfection. It requires reliability. You will fail sometimes. The difference is in recovery speed. Disciplined individuals recover quickly. Undisciplined individuals rationalize. Recovery builds resilience. Resilience strengthens confidence. Compete with your past. Let that guide your focus. Because when you consistently outperform yesterday, you do not need external comparison. Your growth is visible. Your effort is measurable. Your identity is stable. Quiet confidence emerges naturally. It does not need to be announced. It is felt internally. You walk differently. You speak differently. Not louder. Steadier. Because you know the work behind your presence. That is quiet power. You don't need their permission to trust yourself. You need repetition. Confidence is earned, not declared. Self-trust is built through small wins. Compete with your past. When you live by these principles, your attention sharpens further. Because now you are no longer distracted by comparison or validation. You are focused inward. And that inward focus requires protection. Because the world is loud. And noise can erode even disciplined minds. So next, you must learn to detach from the noise entirely. Chapter 9. Detach from the noise. You have rebuilt your foundation. You stopped comparing. You started producing. You detached from validation. You committed to process. You built evidence. Now you must protect it. Because even disciplined minds can be eroded by noise. Noise is constant. Opinions. News cycles. Trends. Metrics. Commentary. Endless content. If you do not control your inputs will control you. That is not dramatic. It is neurological. What you consume shapes what you compare. Say it clearly. What you consume shapes what you compare. If you consume curated perfection all day, you will compare yourself to curated perfection. If you consume outrage all day, you will feel agitated. If you consume negativity all day, you will see threat everywhere. You have a choice. Be intentional about what enters your mind. Or let the algorithm decide your emotional state. That's the key. Your mind is not built for unlimited exposure. It is built for focused input. An information diet is necessary. Just like a food diet. You would not eat randomly all day without consequence. Yet you allow random mental consumption without question. That lack of discipline weakens clarity. It's not about sensitivity. It's about discipline. You must curate deliberately. Start with awareness. Track how much time you spend consuming content daily. Be honest. Then ask, does this input strengthen my focus or scatter it? Does it educate or agitate? Does it inspire action or trigger comparison? If it triggers comparison repeatedly, reduce it. You don't need their permission to mute accounts. You don't need approval to unfollow distractions. You don't owe your attention to anyone. Attention is currency. Spend it carefully. What you consume shapes what you compare. If you constantly expose yourself to lifestyles, bodies, income levels, and achievements beyond your current stage, comparison becomes automatic. Even if you are disciplined. Because exposure plants seeds. And repeated exposure grows expectation. The solution is not isolation. It is filtration. Follow fewer voices. Choose long-form depth over endless short bursts. Replace passive scrolling with intentional learning. This is strategic curation. But curation alone is not enough. You also need silence. Silence is strategy. Say it clearly. Silence is strategy. Schedule periods of intentional disconnection. No notifications. No scrolling. No consumption. Just focus. Or rest. Silence resets your nervous system. It lowers stimulation. It reduces comparison triggers. It restores internal clarity. You have a choice. React constantly. Or create space. Space is powerful. When you disconnect intentionally, you regain authorship over your attention. And authorship over attention equals power. Start small. 1 hour per day without digital input. No music. No social media. No news. Just execution or reflection. If that feels uncomfortable, that discomfort is revealing. It means your brain is conditioned to stimulation. Reconditioning requires restraint. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Mental fasting is the next level. Short periods where you deliberately eliminate unnecessary input. No scrolling for 24 hours. No metrics checking for a day. No commentary consumption. Observe what happens. Anxiety may spike briefly. Then clarity emerges. Because without constant external comparison points, your mind recalibrates. What you consume shapes what you compare. If you consume less noise, you compare less. If you compare less, you focus more. If you focus more, you build faster. Mental fasting restores perspective. You realize most noise is irrelevant to your path. Most debates do not affect your goals. Most trends do not impact your growth. Yet they consume your energy. You have a choice. Enter every conversation. Or protect your mission. Protection requires boundaries. Turn off non-essential notifications. Schedule consumption windows instead of random access. Avoid morning scrolling. Guard the first hour of your day. Because morning input sets mental tone. If you begin your day reacting to others, you surrender authority immediately. Begin your day producing. Silence first. Execution second. Consumption last. That order matters. That's the key. Over time, this discipline transforms your emotional baseline. Less agitation. Less envy. Less urgency. More clarity. More control. More forward motion. You stop living in reaction. You start living in intention. What you consume shapes what you compare. Control your inputs. Control your mental state. And once your mental state stabilizes, your identity strengthens further. Because now you are not only disciplined in action. You are disciplined in attention. Attention is the root of power. And in the final chapter, we consolidate everything. Because when you control attention, action, standards, and effort, you reclaim something profound. Your mental authority. Chapter 10. Reclaim your mental power. Everything you have learned in this audiobook leads to one principle. Power is attention. Where attention goes, identity grows. If your attention is scattered, your identity is unstable. If your attention is disciplined, your identity strengthens. This is not motivational language. It is neurological reality. Your brain wires itself around what you repeatedly focus on. If you focus on comparison, you become insecure. If you focus on validation, you become dependent. If you focus on effort, you become disciplined. If you focus on improvement, you become capable. Where attention goes, identity grows. You have a choice. Guard your attention. Or give it away. That's the key. Most people believe power is external. Money. Status. Recognition. Influence. But those are outcomes. True power is internal authority over your own focus. If you cannot control what you think about, you cannot control what you build. Attention precedes action. Action precedes results. Results reinforce identity. It starts with attention. Control it. Direct it. Protect it. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. You already know how attention drifts. Scrolling. Comparing. Refreshing. Checking. Each distraction pulls you sideways. Each sideways glance leaks energy. And leaked energy slows growth. Reclaiming mental power means narrowing your focus. Single path focus. Say it clearly. Single path focus. Most people dilute their effort. They chase multiple goals simultaneously. They pivot constantly. They abandon projects before compounding begins. They expect quick validation. And when it doesn't arrive, they shift direction. That behavior guarantees stagnation. You cannot build depth without duration. You cannot see results without repetition. You have a choice. Chase novelty. Or commit long enough to see progress. That's the key. Single path focus does not mean you ignore all opportunity. It means you prioritize one meaningful direction and protect it. One primary skill. One primary goal. One primary habit system. Then you give it time. Real time. Months. Years. Not days. You don't need their permission to stay consistent. You don't need social proof to continue. You need patience. Impatience is comparison in disguise. It says, they moved faster. Discipline says, stay the course. Single path focus builds mastery. Mastery builds confidence. Confidence eliminates comparison. This is the full circle. You started by stopping comparison. You end by committing to purpose. Where attention goes, identity grows. If you focus daily on your craft, you become skilled. If you focus daily on your health, you become strong. If you focus daily on your discipline, you become stable. Identity is not declared. It is reinforced. Every day. Through attention. And now comes the final reframe. Your only competition is your potential. Say it clearly. Your only competition is your potential. Not your neighbor. Not your colleague. Not the influencer. Not the stranger online. Your potential. Potential is internal. Potential is yours. And it expands only when you apply pressure to it. You cannot outperform your potential by watching others. You cannot fulfill your potential by proving yourself. You fulfill it through disciplined repetition. You have a choice. Live in reaction. Or live in execution. Execution compounds. Reaction exhausts. Your only competition is your potential. Measure against what you are capable of. Not what others are displaying. This reframe removes envy. It removes urgency. It removes insecurity. Because your focus narrows to one question. Did I move closer to my potential today? That question restores power instantly. If the answer is yes, you win. If the answer is no, you adjust. No comparison required. No validation required. No proving required. Just effort. Control effort. Release outcomes. Improve in silence. Compete with your past. Produce before you consume. Work is the antidote. These principles converge here. Reclaiming mental power is not dramatic. It is disciplined. It is daily. It is quiet. You wake up and protect your attention. You execute your priorities. You track your progress. You ignore irrelevant noise. You stay consistent. That is power. Not dominance over others. Dominance over distraction. Where attention goes, identity grows. Direct it wisely. Because once you truly understand that your only competition is your potential, comparison loses all authority. And when comparison loses authority, your mind becomes clear. When your mind becomes clear, your effort becomes focused. When your effort becomes focused, your growth becomes inevitable. You have a choice. Start today. Stay committed. And build the version of yourself that no comparison can threaten. Your mental power was never lost. It was scattered. Now it is reclaimed. You have spent enough time measuring yourself against people who are not living your life. Enough time questioning your pace. Enough time leaking energy into silent comparison. The truth is simple. Comparison is distraction. Distraction destroys discipline. And discipline is the foundation of confidence. When you stop looking sideways, you start moving forward. When you control your inputs, you control your focus. When you build daily evidence, you build belief. This is not about ignoring the world. It is about choosing your lane and committing to it fully. From this moment forward, you compete with who you were yesterday. You produce before you consume. You improve instead of prove. And you protect your mental power like it is your most valuable asset, because it is. The challenge is direct. For the next 30 days, eliminate comparison triggers, track your daily progress, and focus only on controllable actions. No excuses. No sideways glances. Reclaim your mind.